recording, so. Let me just give you a 3, 2, 1, Kelsey? Oh, okay. Good looking out, huh? She hadn't had her coffee this morning. All right, I appreciate you guys coming. I feel like I've got some familiar faces here, so most of you might know who I am. I'm Dr. Brandon, for those of you who don't know me. I appreciate the opportunity to come. I always brag on Michelle and Pastor Al and Kelsey and the other pastors here for letting me come and speak. I feel like this is a huge missing piece of, in general, but I feel like in the Christian community too, we focus a lot on, the Word, and we don't really focus on the body a whole lot. We really, and I don't know why that is. I'm still on the quest to try to figure out why it is that we neglect. There's mind, body, and there's spirit, and I feel like they're all entangled into one, because the mind will, if you're unhealthy, can have a negative effect on the mind and the spirit. And so I think it's one of those things we're going to talk about today, which is why I've enabled this or labeled this talk Max Mind, and then how the body can affect the mind and the choices that we make on a regular basis from the food that we put in, which I'm not going to talk heavily on, because this is going to be on movement and exercise and how exercise can help us kind of clear our minds a little bit. And it's a free gift from God. God gave us, legs and biceps and shoulders to be able to move, and really a brain that's really neglected when it comes to movement. So we're going to talk about that. Like I said, my name is Dr. Brandon. My wife and I own Revive Chiropractic. I think chiropractic, I get really passionate about what I do because chiropractic saved my life. But two, everything that we do in our office is based off of movement, because movement is life. And in order for your brain to be able to function, not just for the next 5 to 10 months, but for the next 25 to 30 to 40 years. Anybody in here want to live to be 80 to 100, but not like, miserable? I think living to 80 to 100 years old is great, but yet if I'm 80 but I'm in a wheelchair in a nursing home, like that's just not necessarily because of unhealthy choices over the course of life. But nobody wants that. My life was radically transformed with chiropractic and movement. You can see here I've got a titanium plate that holds my spine together. So I'll be honest with you, if it was just exercise and nutrition that transformed my health, that's all I would talk about. And I would be solely just exercise and nutrition. But there's a chiropractic, there's a mindset piece. I gave my life to the Lord in chiropractic school. And so, my wife and I combine, mind, body, spirit in our clinic. And so I'm a walking testimony of the importance of lifestyle and the 5 essentials and what I'm going to teach you today. And if it wasn't for chiropractic and this lifestyle, I don't really know where I would be as far as from a physical mindset standpoint, because I think we all know that individual that's like extremely sick health-wise and how that affects them emotionally. I don't know anybody who feels like garbage who wants to come to church or who wants to get up early in the morning and kind of be diligent in God's word and doing the things necessary. I mean, it's a really difficult thing. So it all kind of plays into one another. I'm going to give you my personal cell phone number. This could be dangerous. But I'm going to give you my personal cell phone number anytime during the actual presentation. Just feel free to shoot me a text, and it'll come up on here, and I can answer some questions. And I think what I'm going to do is we'll do a Facebook Live, or I'll do a Facebook Live. Maybe I'll drag Kelsey along, and we will answer these questions for people, because I'm sure your questions are what everybody else's wants to ask, but they weren't here to ask them. So please take this and ask me whatever questions that you want. So today the goal is to make your brain healthy by giving simple, proactive steps in the most effective and efficient way possible. Sound good? You're not going to hear me the word mental health. You're not going to hear me use that word because we don't have a mental health problem. We have a brain health problem. I want to be very, very clear on that. We don't have a mental health problem. We have a brain health problem. This is a kind of a newer way of talking about it, because for some reason when you hear the word mental health, you automatically go to this almost like stigma of an individual who's in a straitjacket in a padded room who's nuts, versus brain health. And what I want you to understand is that mental health, or what I call brain health, is not a chemical imbalance. Let me say that again. You don't have brain health, anxiety, depression because of chemical imbalance. That is what the medical community will say you have. And so therefore, when you have a chemical imbalance, you go to a doctor and they give you a medication to treat the imbalance in the brain, the chemical imbalance. But what created the chemical imbalance? You weren't born with a chemical imbalance, ladies and gentlemen. Does that make sense? Like you didn't come out of, your mother's womb, and God didn't create you with this chemical imbalance of serotonin. It was created over the course of time because of the input into your life, the environment at which you live, the stress, the inability to manage stress, okay? And so we're going to talk a lot about brain health and how we change that, because it's not a chemical imbalance. It's not something that you were born with. One thing here that I want to touch base on before I kind of start talking about exercise is that we have to take our thoughts captive. Not only is this a biblical concept, but it's a scientific fact that we must take our thoughts captive. This is an amazing book, and if there's one book that I challenge you to read this year, it's called Switch on Your Brain by Dr. Caroline Leaf. She's a communication pathologist, audiologist, and cognitive neuroscientist, and she's a Christian. And so she talks about how science and God's Word are, basically God's Word kind of proves scientific fact. And what she says here is that input equals output. Input equals output. And so, like I said, you don't have just a bad brain. You didn't wake up one day with feeling blue because you have a chemical imbalance. The input in your life, the fact that you haven't taken your thoughts captive and you haven't put on this, barrier to allow certain things to come in and then not allow certain things to come in, aka Fox News. Okay, so you got to really watch what it is that you allow to go into your brain, because the more that you allow something to feed into your brain, the more your physiology changes, and that actually becomes an actual real belief for you. You have to watch who it is that you allow to speak into your life, because those people will all of a sudden almost become, it'll seem okay, right? I'm not saying that we shouldn't hang out with people who need to be ministered to. I think that's the reason why we're followers and why we're the gospel, right? That's the Great Commission is to go. It's not what I'm saying, but the point here is that we have to take thoughts captive. Epigenetics. So before I go into that, I want to just get you to understand that genetics, brain health, mental health issues are not a genetic issue. Let me say that again. Brain health, mental health issues are not a genetic issue. Just because your mother or your father had anxiety or depression does not mean that you have that, or you're going to have that particular type of disease because of them. You have a genetic predisposition. That's completely different. Okay, born sick and weak, one, makes no sense biblically. Number two, it makes no sense scientifically. Now, your mother or your father's lifestyle and some of the things that they did, and then they give birth to a baby, and therefore they maybe have those habits or those things built into their DNA. But here's the cool thing about genes is they can be switched on or switched off. That's called epigenetics. So a little bit of a DNA lesson here. You have a cell. Inside that cell is a nucleus, and in that nucleus is called DNA. DNA doesn't just turn on, like you're not born with the DNA cancer gene, right? That's just not what you don't have just cancer. You have a cell, and you have receptors on the outside of that cell that are attached, things from your environment, attached to those receptors, those proteins, and then it actually changes the DNA structure within the actual cell itself. So your DNA, you're not born with bad DNA. What happens is the receptors on the outside of your cell take in the environment, good or bad, at which you're living, the food, the exercise, the negative thoughts, the toxic chemicals, and change the actual structure of the DNA inside the cell. This is good news, because that means that you can actually change your environment, which therefore changes the expression of those genetics. Does that make sense? So please stop living in that mindset of, I was just born this way. I went to my doctor and, oh, ma'am, you've got high blood pressure in your family. Let's put you on blood pressure medications to make sure you don't die. That is a fear-based not scientific way of living, but that is kind of what all we can do at this point from a medical standpoint, is because we're not going to teach lifestyle modification and changing those thoughts. We're going to feed into the fear-based model of, I was born sick and weak, and so therefore here, take these just to make sure, that we stay there. It's not a good place to live. This is a research study that basically put this genetic or the Human Genome Project on its head and basically said this doesn't even make any sense anymore. This is Duke University, the Journal of Molecular Biology. And so this is what we call a Gouty mice, okay? A Gouty mice are always born overweight, yellow, and they have lipid profiles, cholesterol, blood pressure, and kind of cancerous predisposition all the time. So which is this big mouse here. And so what they wanted to do is they wanted to change the diet of the mother during pregnancy to see whether it would have an impact on the children that were born from that mother. Okay? And this was the first research that was ever done to see that, hey, does epigenetics really exist? Can I change the lifestyle of a parent that was born to a parent who was sick and suffering, and then give birth to a child that's not? This is huge. And so all they did is they changed the methyl group or the diet of the mother. And so you can see here, both are pregnant. These are the offspring of the mice. One changed their diet, one didn't. And then the one that did change their diet gave birth to a mouse that was not obese and was not yellow and did not have a lipid profile that was bad or any kind of chronic illness, which means that the diet during pregnancy plays a huge impact into how that child is born. So let me just say this, moms. I always tell mommies in my office that when you're pregnant, it's extremely important that you take your thoughts captive and that you take care and put good, healthy food in your body, because what do you think the negative consequences of not doing that are to your child? They wake up or they get up at 6, 7 years old and they don't love themselves because maybe mommy didn't love herself, or maybe she told herself that she was born sick and weak and toxic. And, so it really does have a huge impact. Your gut and serotonin. So does anybody know much about serotonin? So serotonin is a feel-good molecule, okay? And so when it comes to depression and anxiety or brain health, serotonin is a big player. And your gut is where serotonin, 95% of the serotonin in your brain is produced in your gut. Is that not cool? Maybe, and if you have a good gut. If you have a crappy gut, that's not cool at all. Okay, and what do you think the percentage of individuals that have gut problems? Very, very high. And so, what I want you to understand here is there's a huge component here that has to do with brain health and anxiety and depression when it comes to serotonin, but not because we're born with abnormal serotonin in our brain or whatever, but because our guts are destroyed. All the antibiotics that we take, all the medication that we take, all the sugar that we bring in, all the stress that we have, the lack of good healthy probiotics and good healthy foods, and the proteins that we're bringing in are pumped full of antibiotics, and it's just destroying our gut, which therefore decreases the serotonin at which our brain can produce, and that is our feel-good molecule. That is what gives our body this sense of feeling and well-being and love. And I want to get up in the morning and I want to get my day started and I want to go save the world, and I love myself and I love my kids and I've got an awesome life. Even though COVID's here and everything is crazy, I still have purpose in my life versus, let's just see how it goes, just kind of stink like an Eeyore. I call it the Eeyore kind of, just Eeyore kind of mindset. Eeyore had a gut problem, okay? Eeyore had a gut problem, and his mommy probably had a gut problem, and therefore, which is why he was, that way. Your gut and serotonin. So a couple things. You go to our website, write this down. I'll give you a note sheet. Go to revivechiro.com. This is not our nutrition seminar. I've been here before. I've done some nutrition stuff, but I have a free webinar and a bunch of free information for you on there. Homework this weekend, go home and watch our free Nutrition 101 webinar where I kind of go through some real basic stuff that is really impactful and very life-changing. And then any questions that you have, you can text me and I'll answer them. But go to revivechiro.com and go to our resources, webinars. I've got thyroid stuff on there. I've got all kinds of really cool stuff on you. But sugar is the big player when it comes to brain health. So I'm going to read you a couple things here. Sugar intake could increase depression risk over its potential influence of BDNF. Does anybody know what BDNF is? Brain-derived neurotropic factor, okay? And so these are levels, and so individuals who have depression or anxiety or chronically ill, they have low levels of brain-derived neurotropic factor, which is kind of it actually helps your brain form new synapses and learning new things, and it allows for your brain not to be so inflamed and sluggish. It's really it's almost like vegetables for your brain. It's like steroids for your brain, but naturally that God gave you, as long as you're exercising and moving, which I'll talk about, and if you're eating a diet that's low inflammatory, not full of fruity pebbles and Monster energy drinks. But most of it, our young adult, I mean, that is a huge part of that. I mean, I know we laugh about that, but that's not uncommon to see in an elementary school or in any kind of breakfast. Furthermore, it comes to addiction, effects of sugar influencing neurotransmitters could link sugar intake with low mood. So now let me just say this. I'm a man of science. The Bible proves science, but I also want you to understand that some of the things that I'm telling you up here I'm not just pulling them, out of my bottom. I'm getting this from peer-reviewed, top-level research. And you're saying, well, why doesn't my pediatrician or my general practitioner ever tell me this? I can't give you the answer to that question. Okay, I just know that we're 20 years behind in medicine when it comes to nutrition and functional movement and things like that. The average nutrition that a medical doctor will get in medical school is about 15 to 20 hours over the course of 6 years. And that only has to do with nutritional deficiencies like Corsicor and protein deficiencies, but not how to teach somebody how to eat well and move well. It's just not built into the course curriculum. This is the Journal of Biological Psychiatry and the Journal of Neuroscience and Behavioral Reviews. Some of the top neuroscience in the world saying that the food that you put in your body has a direct impact on brain-derived neurotropic factor, but then also the neurotransmitters like serotonin in your brain. So let's get into the exercise stuff here and why I believe that exercise and really motion in the spine, which is why I love to combine chiropractic and exercise. But here's the problem, though. How many of you would love to get up in the morning and exercise, but you have so much chronic pain and achy joints and stiff joints that, like, if you did put in 3 or 4 days a week in the gym, you'd probably have to stop because you'd be in so much pain. Most of us, I say, people ask me, Dr. B, can chiropractic help me lose weight? I can put together some research for you that would say that individuals that get adjusted have a higher metabolic rate. But I think the big thing is that individuals that are adjusted are living a chiropractic lifestyle with a low inflammatory diet and a good positive mindset. They're not in as much pain, which means they can get up and they can move and they can exercise and they can do the things that their body was programmed to do, versus the person who's sedentary, sitting at a desk, overweight, and who maybe isn't getting necessarily what they need to get as far as motion, and their joints are falling apart. The science is this: 90% of the stimulation and nutrition to the brain is generated by the movement of the spine. The best example that I can give you is I donate Wobble cushions to individuals in IEP classrooms. Why would a Wobble cushion be a really good thing for a child with a learning disability, ADHD, or Down syndrome? They are not necessarily producing, or they've got some neurochemical type of things going on in their brain, and so motion or putting that child onto a Wobble cushion or getting them to do things actively in class does what to their brain? It calms them down, because motion of the spine and stimulating those nerve pathways to the brain give the brain kind of like a brake pedal. It says, whoa, 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 like a kid who's just all over the place. And then a teacher will say, well, this person needs to be on ADHD medication, which, no offense, that should never be the teacher's responsibility to diagnose a kid with ADHD. And then they go to the pediatrician. They do a subjective thing. Is he having a hard time paying attention in class? Is he wiggling? Is he squirming? Is he this? Okay, great. Let's put him on Ritalin, right? Which, if you don't actually fix why it is that brain is not producing that brain-derived neurotropic factor, and then you put a kid on that dangerous medication, what are the side effects of that? Detrimental, right? It becomes almost like a zombie because he's not necessarily getting what they need. And exercise is a fantastic way to push the brake and calm that person down. And I'm going to show you some things you can do here. Serotonin. Research says that exercise is one of the best ways to drive serotonin up into the brain. You combine that with a good, healthy diet, an anti-inflammatory diet. Go to Nutrition 101 webinar and read on that. Serotonin, like I said, 95% is produced in the gut and about 5% is produced in the brain. Research is extremely clear that exercise is a free gift to drive up serotonin. Actually, the British Medical Journal says that exercise has a 3-fold increase in serotonin levels, something that a serotonin reuptake inhibitor medication will never do. Okay, so for somebody, but what happens to somebody who is having some brain health issues, they're anxious, they're depressed? Does anybody like that ever want to get up and exercise? Not normally. And then they get on a medication and it may make them feel better, but they're still not moving. Like, I don't know one person who's taking SSRIs who's like, man, I can't wait to get up in the morning and exercise. It just doesn't work like that because they treat it like a chemical imbalance, but they don't change the input going into the brain. And so if I don't change the input and take those thoughts captive and change those negative lifestyle patterns, and then I put something in the brain to try to manipulate it, the brain's just kind of like in lockdown mode. They call it lock and load. And this is where a lot of kids who have some learning disabilities or ADHD and they get put on these medications, it takes their prefrontal cortex and it puts them in lock and load. And when you're in lock and load and you don't know what to do, this is where a lot of kids are having suicidal tendencies. Because I'm either going to lock or I'm going to load. And when I lock, I'm locked down. I don't want to talk to anybody. Or if I load, I'm crazy. Does this make sense? And it's not healthy for the brain. So we got to make sure that we're moving. One thing here, this is just a slide on brain-derived neurotropic factor. Brain-derived neurotropic factor helps the brain adapt and learn. Okay, so let's just say this. Well, if I've been in a negative pattern for the past 10 to 15, 20 years, how do I break that pattern? Well, the best thing that you can do is to move and to exercise, because what that does is the stimulation of brain-derived neurotropic factor actually helps to rewire the brain. Okay, so who here plays an instrument or has ever played an instrument? So I'm just going to pick on Kelsey because I know her first name very well. So Kelsey, if you stop playing an instrument after you've played it for a while, let's just say what instrument do you play? Let's just say you played the instrument really well, okay? And then you stop playing that instrument for 6 months, and then you pick that instrument back up. What's going to happen to your ability to play that guitar well? Well, you're not going to play it well. You're going to be rusty. You're going to miss notes, and then you're going to have to reprogram your brain to be able to actually try to make those connections again. That's called neuroplasticity. Right? So this is why we can take kids with Down syndrome or autism, and we can move them, and we can exercise them, and we can change their lifestyle, and then we can actually break those neurological patterns. It's called neuroplasticity by driving brain-derived neurotropic factor into the body. It's a really awesome stuff. Like this is like world, class like neurology, but it's very simple. You've got to continue to create patterns in your life. And guess what? That's why exercise for 2 weeks and then taking a month off doesn't work, right? You've got to create some consistency into your life, and you've got to create some barriers that will allow you to stay consistent. Because if you're not consistent, in my clinic, we do a thing called home exercises. And so the reason why I give somebody home exercises for the spine, especially if a spine's not in a good position, think about this. Your spine's been that way for 25 to 30 years. You come in and you get your spine adjusted, but you don't do anything to rechange or change the patterns in your brain. What's going to happen to your spine? It's going to go right back to where it was. So we give exercises and rehabilitative brain exercises to train the brain and the muscles to know what normal is. That's called neuroplasticity. So I'm not trying to force the spine back into a good place. I'm trying to retrain the brain to know what normal is. So if you don't do those exercises on a regular, consistent basis, your brain's never going to know what's normal and what's not. Okay? If you don't get up every single morning at a very consistent time, you're never going to have a schedule. If you don't have a plan for your life and a regimented schedule of when this is going to happen and when this is not, you're never going to have consistency. The brain records and remembers everything, and the best thing that you can do to do that is to exercise, eat good, healthy food, get good sleep, and minimize stress, which I'll talk about exercise and stress here for a second. Now, when it comes to exercise, I want to go through a couple things here because time is huge. I have talked to a lot of individuals that say, I don't have time to exercise. Would somebody can we be honest with ourselves and just raise your hand if you would say, I don't have time to exercise? Okay, great. Almost every single person in the room would say that. And if I was in a room of 1,000, I would say 90% would do that. I'm not tooting my own horn here. I'm just saying that I've got 3 kids under the age of 5. I've got one of the largest natural health care clinics in the country, and I've got radio, I'm all over the place. I have time to exercise because I make time to exercise, okay? Anytime someone says I don't have time to exercise, it's probably because you haven't made that something in the forefront of your brain to make a priority. That's number one. Number two is that exercise doesn't have to go any more than 12 to 20 minutes. Now, by a show of hands, who in here has 12 to 20 minutes a day to devote to exercise? Okay, good. So here's the cool thing about exercise is that research is pretty clear that excessive exercise at a high intensity isn't necessarily good all the time, but exercising at a low intensity, like walking, isn't necessarily as good either. So the good news is we don't need to necessarily go to a spot where we have to puke and vomit, but at the same time, we don't necessarily need to go to a spot where we're just kind of walking at snail speed. I'm not saying that there's not benefits to either of those, but when it comes to efficiency, right in the middle is where we want to be at for a couple reasons. One, I talked about stress. Exercise, or the research is very clear that somebody who exercises at the same heart rate, so anyone here go to the gym in January, you get on the treadmill, you hit the fat burning zone, and you walk there for 45 minutes. Okay, everybody's somewhat, does that. Research is saying that actually increases cortisol levels. So you actually increase stress hormone, and therefore you'll begin to store fat. Okay, it also has a huge dip in our immune system, which means that we will actually have a big, huge plummet in our immune system, which means that we're going to be more likely to develop sickness against viruses and bacteria. The other side is the CrossFit athlete that goes to the gym and destroys themselves 5 to 6 days a week, rolls around the floor, dying, pukes, whatever, and they push themselves into this excessive amount of exercise. You and I both know that person. That used to be me. As a world-class CrossFit athlete, one of the best in the world, I pushed my body to a point where it was not healthy. And it got to the point where my gut was destroyed. It created leaky gut. It created anxiety. In women, this can create amenorrhea, which is an absence of menstrual cycles. They can't get pregnant. Their hormones go all over the place. So there's excessiveness over on that side too. I do not know one person who steps up on stage and is a bodybuilder or a figure competitor who is healthy. It always exists in the middle. Somebody who's just moderate to intense, moderate one day, maybe intense, back and forth, balance, okay? That's where the health and the healing begins. So 12 to 20 minutes, everybody has that. The type of exercise. The type of exercise is pretty crucial here because there's not really a whole lot of functional whenever I'm walking. Okay, think about this. How many times do you bend over to pick something up or to squat on a regular basis? Think about how many times that you bend over or you squat on a daily basis. Just give me a number of how many times you think the human being squats or bends over on a daily basis. Over 100. Okay, so the average person will bend over or squat over 100 times. That is a squat and that is a deadlift. Okay? right? So if I'm not squatting and deadlifting and doing functional movement, so the human being was supposed to be able to learn how to pick things up off the floor, aka, back in the day, 1,000 years ago, we had to lift up rocks and we had to, do different things, okay? We had to squat to go to the bathroom. I mean, in some countries, they're eating like this. Many of you, if I ask you to get in this position, it would probably take you 4 hours to get there. But that's not a functional, that you have to understand, that's not good, because that means that our hips and our low back and our spine hasn't been moved, and that's kind of like a rusty bolt that hasn't been turned in 25 to 30 years. That's not good. You look at cultures like China and Japan, and they're eating in this position. Like they're just kind of chilling here. The kids are playing video games. Like they're, in this position, and they're just hanging out here. They have no hip or joint or low back issues. They don't have the hip and low back issues that we have. What do we do every day? We sit, but we sit with our hips above 90 degrees most of the time, which is bad. Because then what happens when we have to go to the bathroom? That's why we have what I call the oh crap handles. Because we really can't even sit down to the commode without holding on to something because we don't have the range of motion. It's very, very, very unhealthy. Does that make sense? Because we're not going to get the range of motion in our low backs. And so the type of exercise is important. So squatting, pushing, pulling, doing functional movements. Now, someone would say, well, I go to the gym and I go to, and I go to the machines. I'm okay with that, but just make sure that we're moving and doing variability in those machines. Someone who says, well, I like to spin. Like, great. I think spinning is good. But you can't be in this position and spin every single day because, one, that's not necessarily a good position to be in, but your body needs some variability. So I like to tell people, maybe go for a walk one day, then the next day do some functional movements, do some push-ups, squats, sit-ups, do some planks. The next day go for a walk again, maybe go for a hike. Do things to stimulate your brain at different planes of motion. Because if all I'm doing is this, that's one plane of motion. And you've got 3 different planes of motion at which your brain activates. So have you noticed that kids today are definitely not as coordinated as they were 30 years ago? Why do you think that is? Do kids play hopscotch at school anymore? Do kids jump rope at school anymore? No. Gym class is an opportunity to get on your cell phone and just, right? It's an alternative, or it's an option. It's not like a mandatory thing anymore. And so you cannot develop the right and left sides of your brain unless you're doing things like hopping and jumping and hopscotch and one leg and two leg. I mean, just think about that. Some kids have a hard time walking one foot in front of the other without tripping over themselves because of that lack of balance within the brain. So the type of exercise is really, really crucial. So one thing that I really like to do here is what I call Tabata, okay? And what I want to do is I'm actually we're gonna do this, okay? So what I want you to do is I want you just to kind of get spread out like arms length apart, okay? And we're going to just kind of put this into play for you, and I want to show you how this works. We're going to do 4 rounds. 20 seconds on, 10 seconds off for 4 rounds. And what we're going to do is Tabata is 8 rounds, 20 seconds on, 10 seconds off. And you pick 8 rounds, 20 seconds on, 10 seconds off. And it's actually 4 minutes of exercise. So what you would do is you would pick like squats, or you would pick planks, or you would get like a band and do some band rows. So 3 exercises. Guess how many minutes that is total of exercise? It's 12. 12 minutes of exercise with all you need. What we're going to do is we're going to simulate it. So what we're going to do is we're going to stand up, and we're going to do like punching as fast as you can for 20 seconds. And then we're going to do 10 seconds rest. And we're going to do 20 seconds of punching, right? And we're going to get our heart rate up. Anybody can do this. This is a massive brain exercise. I tell people all the time too, if you're sitting at a desk all day, every hour to 2 hours, do something like this to wake up your brain, right? Have your kids, if they're at home doing work, like have them do 10 burpees, then go back to their station. Sound good? All right, so everybody stand up for me. Everybody get 5 far enough apart. So let me, whenever we do this, a little bit of bend in your hips and your knees, okay? My elbows are in, and I'm going to fire from here as fast as I can. So this isn't like precision, okay? All right, I'm going to get a WOD timer here going, and we're going to see, you're going to hear some beeps, okay? So we're going to do 4 rounds, 20 seconds on, 10 seconds off. I got the timer to start. We got a 10 seconds on. In 3, 2, 1, go. Work. Faster, 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 faster. Go, 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 go. Fast, 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 fast. Use your core, not just your arms. Use your core, use your core. Move, move. 10 seconds. Breathe in through your nose, out through your mouth. 3, 2, 1, break. That was 1 round. We're going to do 3 more. Okay, are we breathing at all? Okay, see, look at that. It doesn't take a whole lot. Breathe, go. Faster, 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 faster. There you go. Use your hips, use your hips, use your hips, use your hips. There you go. Snap off those punches, snap off those punches. Man, if you guys had to protect yourself, I'd be scared. No, I'm just kidding. Pastor Al's got it. That's good. He's the man of the house, so. Rest. How we doing? You breathing? This is just punching the air. This does not take, right? This costs nothing. Go, 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 go. This costs absolutely nothing. You can do this at home. This costs nothing. Just your time. 10 seconds. There you go, there you go, there you go. Punch, 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 punch. 3, 2, 1, rest. Last round. All out here, okay? All out here, max as much as you can go. I want you to bend your legs a little bit more, kind of get a little bit burn in your quads. Now go. There you go. Bend those legs, bend those legs. Yeah. Remember to breathe, remember to breathe. 10 seconds. 5. Well done. All right, give yourself a high five, pat on the back. Right? So how do you feel? How do you feel? Are you breathing? Yes. Okay, if you're not breathing, that's because we only did 4 rounds. Okay, so do 8 rounds. So we you can pick a squat. So chair squats, you can do push-ups, you can do a band, you can do some sit-ups, right? Pick 3 or 4 exercises, 8 rounds. 20 seconds on, 10 seconds off. This is called, this app that I have on my phone is called SmartWOD. Write that down. It's a free app. You can get on your iPhone. It's called SmartWOD. And then you can actually have all these different timers, okay? And it's called a Tabata timer. And it will literally, like, you don't go out and buy this $1,000 timer, at a workout store. I mean, literally, it's already on your phone, okay? And you can pick 3 exercises, have a minute rest in between each exercise, and that's 12 minutes of exercise. Who here can do 12 minutes of exercise every day? And oh yeah, by the way, get your kids and get your family involved in that. How many times do you think my kids come downstairs to see me exercising and they jump in too? And they're always better and less aggressive and ornery whenever they exercise, okay? Cool, you guys can have a seat. Efficiency. So why is this efficient? So everybody can exercise for 12 to 20 minutes a day, no problem. But not only is it efficient from a time standpoint, but it's also efficient from a money standpoint, okay? So you do not have to have a gym membership in order to be fit. I do not work out at a gym. I have a gym membership, but I don't go there half the time. I have everything in my basement. And if I didn't have everything in my basement as far as weights and stuff, your body weight. Okay, Dr. Steven's a good example. He lives with his parents right now, but he doesn't have a whole lot of equipment. But Dr. Steven, do you have any excuse as to why it is that you can't do body weight stuff every single morning? No. So, I mean, he stays in great shape. Your body weight is one of the best, weight systems that there is. Okay? I mean, most athletes out there are individuals, that are really, really in good shape. They just do push-ups and sit-ups and things like that. Don't take advantage. You don't need this massive, fancy weightlifting equipment to be in shape. Like, I think some people say they need that in order to be motivated to work out. And then oftentimes I go to their basement and they've got all this amazing equipment, but yet nothing's done to it. It collects dust. Okay, so just use your body weight. This is the research, though. The cool thing about exercising for 12 to 20 minutes at a pretty high intensity is that you burn fat for way longer than the person who would exercise for an hour at the same intensity. So let's just time aside. I want to get results. Like I actually want to lose body composition, because individuals who have lower body composition, they have less heart disease, they have less cancer, they have less, chronic health issues. So exercising for 12 minutes, look at this sheet here. An individual, this afterburn, or what we call metabolic effect, doing those exercises just like you did, if you exercised on Monday, theoretically, you could exercise again on Wednesday, but take Tuesday off, and you're still burning fat. Versus, I exercised for an hour on the treadmill at the same pace, and I went for a walk, and I only burned fat for 6 hours after that hour walk. Which one's more effective and more efficient? Now, I'm not saying that you can't pray and you can't go for a walk with your family. That's not what I'm saying. I'm just saying from an exercise standpoint, you don't need to go to Planet Fitness and get on a treadmill to be healthy, okay? Now, minimize toxicity. We've got to think about this for a little bit here, because there's some things that I think are feeding into the fact, or the input. And so, listen, I actually can empathize a little bit when it comes to brain health stuff. We almost lost some dear people in my family to brain health issues. So I think there's a time and a place for medication, especially if it's an emergency situation. However, like I said, it's not a chemical imbalance. Like, we can't fix an input problem by putting more toxins into the body. Okay, so I always use the bucket analogy. You've got this bucket, so we'll just use this as an example. So this is your body. Okay, and over the course of your life, we naturally begin to fill our bucket or our cup with toxins, okay? Some of us at a higher rate than others based upon our lifestyle. Is that fair? Every one of us has different levels of water in our bucket or toxicity. The person who, I've had some patients in my clinic who this COVID-19 pandemic season has pushed them over the edge. They weren't having any kind of anxiety or depression before that, but because their body was so full of toxins and just their bucket was overflowing to begin with, and then one big stressful event just took them over the edge. And what that is that as this bucket becomes full of water, everywhere you move, what happens to it? It spills over. Okay, and I'm not going to do that on all this expensive equipment. But that's called symptoms. This is the person who's like, man, I didn't have any symptoms whatsoever. I felt completely fine. All of a sudden, boom, a stressful thing in my life, and then everything just, I'm anxious, I don't want to do anything, I'm depressed, I'm just gaining weight, my thyroid's all over the place, I don't have any kind of sex drive, I don't feel loved. And really, that's been going on for quite some time, but it wasn't until you spilled that over and those symptoms became, and then what happens when we go to the doctor and we have those symptoms spilling over? Here, treat the symptoms. So what we do is we put toxins into the bucket to try to treat an already toxic problem. And that's where I'm kind of that doesn't make any sense, because I'm putting more toxins into my bucket. What do we have to do with those things? We have to begin to pull those out. Does that make sense? And so this kind of stuff I find is people who are anxious and have really bad guts, they crave things like Monster Energy drink, and they're craving caffeine, and they're craving sugar, and they're craving chocolate, and they're craving carbohydrates, because their body is just loving that kind of stuff. Individuals who are addicted to crack cocaine and addicted to sugar, their brains light up on an MRI scan, CT scan the same way. Dopamine or craving dopamine or this feel good can happen with sugar. It can happen with pornography. It can happen with drugs. I mean, it's all the same kind of reward deficiency syndrome. And then we get on Facebook, right? And then it's I want to see how the rest of the world's doing. Here's one of the best things that I've ever heard is that don't go on Facebook and compare your day-to-day with everybody else's highlight reel. Because that's exactly what Facebook is. Everybody else's highlight reel about or everybody else is complaining about what's going on. It drives me nuts when I hear someone just massively complaining all the time on Facebook, but yet there's nothing done to do it. we've got to take a step back and say information plus application equals transformation. So information is one thing, but the application of the information to have transformation is big. I'm not saying Facebook isn't a good thing to use as far as a communication tool, but I find that individuals that are struggling to produce serotonin and they have gut issues, it's almost Facebook is really nasty for them because everything else they're comparing themselves to. Comparison is the destroyer of all joy. When I'm comparing myself or my life or how I look or where everybody else is at, they did great through the pandemic. You have no idea what that person's doing behind that keyboard. And a lot of times that's dopamine for some people. Instead of actually, changing things, they're using Facebook as a way to fill a void that can only be filled through, changing it. I want to talk about, just where does the chiropractic, piece kind of fit into this? Because I think that, where I get the best results with some patients in my clinic that have some brain health issues is that there's a brain communication glitch, okay? So if you notice, I love this slide, the stress comes into your life. So I use the tiger. So what would happen right now if I let a tiger loose into this place? Your serotonin levels are going to go down. Like you're not going to feel good. You're going to be in a fight or flight. You're going to be in a fight or flight response. Right, and you're gonna your sex drive is gonna go down, your digestive system is gonna slow down. You're gonna be in fight or flight, and so right now in this pandemic, everybody is in fight or flight. Okay, you're kind of, and if you don't believe that, nobody's in rest and digest because regardless of whether or not you're in fear or whatever. It's just there's a lot of unknowns out there. So it pushes your body into fight or flight, and that's a stress. Now, God innately designed our body to be able to handle fight or flight for short periods of time. Instance, if somebody were to, run after my son in the mall and take him, you do not want to be around me at that time. I go savage. Okay, like I'm not nice, Dr. Brandon. I go back to like Division I wrestler, MMA fighter, Dr. Brandon. Okay, so I will fight. That's for short periods of time when we're under stress. But for somebody to be in constant fight or flight response every single day, all the time, which is the culture that we live in today, is when we begin to develop some of these gut-brain axis issues. So we start to develop psychological and behavioral disorders. Cognitively, I can't focus. I get this more in my clinic than ever before, brain fog. I can't focus. Like I thought knew what I was doing, but like 15 minutes later, I'm like a squirrel chasing a nut. Like I'm all over the place. Like I know I'm supposed to get this work done, but I have no ability. That's because the tiger's chasing after you, but because you haven't figured out a way to put the tiger back in the cage, you're creating cognitive deficits, loneliness, like feeling of just self-worth. My vagus nerve, I begin to completely tax my adrenals, and so I'm exhausted. This is the person who's like, I wake up in the morning and I have coffee and I'm still exhausted. And then I go to work and I swing by Starbucks and I get that Frappuccino latte with 1,000 grams of sugar in it and I'm still tired. And then I have to take a nap and because your adrenals are just completely shot because your body is being chased by a tiger. And then my gut starts to give me problems. And then I didn't have gut issues, but now I can go to the bathroom through a screen door and nothing is actually solid anymore. Or I can't go to the bathroom at all, which means that if my bowels are not doing what I need it to do, or I'm constantly getting skin rashes and I've got eczema, that is a gut issue that was created by that stressor. And then I get dysbiosis, so I get abnormal gut bacteria. And if I have abnormal gut bacteria, then I expose myself or I increase the risk of developing viral and bacterial infections, aka I'm more susceptible to COVID. I'm more susceptible to bacterial infections. I'm sick all the time. My immune system is down. And every single one of these areas, what does that set us up for if we're not careful? Going to the doctor and getting a medication to treat each one of those symptoms, but none of those things will put the tiger back in the cage. That make sense? And then neuroendocrine immune mediators. So I'm neurologically, I'm a wreck. My endocrine system shuts down. I turn 50. They want to rip all my insides out. I get a hysterectomy. I can't have children. All these different types of things because a tiger is chasing after me. So what I like to say with the 5 essentials or what we do in our clinic is that we really allow the brain and the body to communicate to one another with as least amount of interference as possible. Because is stress ever going to go away? No. Like, the key to health is adaptation. I cannot take stress out of your life, but the person who is going to be healthy and will not get chronic illness and will not be on a ton of different medications isn't exposed to stress. It isn't the one who's not exposed to stress. They are. It's just this system is managed well. Does that make sense? Like, I want you to understand something. People look at me and they ask me this question all the time. Dr. B, you're so disciplined. Like, you're just different. I am no different than anybody in this room. Like, and I say that, like, I'm very, very driven and I'm very, very regimented. And I have a type 1 Enneagram perfectionistic personality. But there's nothing special about me besides I do the simple things very well all the time. There's not very many days where you'll see me just fall off the bandwagon. Does that make sense? It's not about being 100% in one thing and 20% in another. It's about being 75 to 80% consistent over the course of your life. I think that's if you want my answer to health and wholeness and vitality and to be 80 to 100 years old, playing with your grandbabies on the beach with no medication, it's consistency. And it's doing that every single day. And when you make a mistake, you get back up, you pull your bootstraps back up, and you just keep moving. Does that make sense? Like, life is not easy. It was never meant to be easy. And I think that's the biggest misconception in the Christian world is I give my life to Jesus and all my problems go away. Good luck. That is not how that was supposed to go, and that's not even a biblical truth. It's actually struggle produces what? Endurance. Don't make the same mistake 4 times. Learn from it. Okay? You know, and I both know, that not exercising, putting crappy food in your body does not make you the person that God has created you to be. But what are the barriers that you have in your life to change those habits? That's my question. Okay? The difference between me is I know what my problems are. I know where I struggle. And so I've got those people around me who can help kind of keep the barriers up so I don't fall off the bandwagon. You know, one thing I think is vital, and I want to understand something. We talked about this brain connection, the gut-brain axis, the dysbiosis, the neuroimmune response. You know, God innately designed our brain to communicate effectively and to create those neurochemicals and to have that direct influence on the gut from the brain. So when you look at the spine from the side, the spinal cord has to have this nice curve in it, so that way the brain can effectively communicate to the rest of the body via the spinal cord. And that's kind of like what we call your lifeline. And so individuals that are chronically stressed, aka this little boy right here, this is what I'm seeing a lot in my clinic. This is what I'm seeing a lot from doctors all around the country, especially after COVID-19. What's the difference between this x-ray and this x-ray right here of this 9-year-old little boy? There is no curve there. How far forward is this 9-year-old little boy's head? What do you think this 9-year-old spends most of his life? Looking down at an iPad. He's also extremely stressed. His diet is full of sugar, Fruity Pebbles, milk. He's got chronic ear infections, so he's ridden with antibiotics, and so they've destroyed his gut. He's got all kinds of learning disabilities, but yet, look at his brainstem, and where is he at right now? Is he fight or flight, or is he rest and digest? He is in fight or flight response. And so this little boy was put on an antipsychotic ADHD medication that almost took his life. Because remember I told you lock and load? When you put somebody and they're in lock and load right now and you give them an SSRI or you give them something, but you don't actually fix what that body is doing, it becomes really, really, really hard for that person to adapt. So, you know, taking some of this stuff away, what are some things that we can take away from today? Number one is that it's not a mental health issue, it's a brain health issue, which means that you have the opportunity to change it. Think your wording. Would God really design somebody with a mental health issue? And even if that person was born with some type of a congenital anomaly, neuroplasticity says that that person's brain can change. Like I've seen that. autistic kids. I've got autistic kids in my clinic that were told they were never going to speak to their parents and they were never going to read again. And then through the changing their lifestyle and changing their brain, they're reading, they're speaking to their parents. Now they're never going to be the all-star baseball player, but could you imagine being able to hear the words coming from your children's mouth that, hey, Dad, or I love you? Like, that's a big deal. And before, they were never told they were ever going to do that. That's a win, okay? But, and then we got to move. Like, we've got to move. Movement is life. If you don't move, your brain suffers. Your joints suffer, right? We just can't. And we've got to vary, what we're doing as far as movement. Movement needs to be fun, okay? We've got to figure out a way to make it fun. If hiking for you is fun, then go for a hike. But don't hike at the same pace. Walk fast for a minute and slow down for a minute. Go up hills one day, don't go up hills the next day, right? Change what you're doing there and make sure that you understand that the food and the sugar in your gut are extremely important in that particular process. A couple things with this. If you're, just have questions for me or you want, maybe you're just struggling, obviously take this home, implement this kind of stuff. Text me if you have any questions and I'll answer them for you. But if you're like in crisis mode, or if you have somebody in your life or that is in crisis mode and they need, I can sit up here and I can give all this information, but I do know that sometimes there are people that are just in that mode of like, I need a doctor, like I need help, like I don't really know how to implement this, so like I'm here for you to do that. I want to walk you through and answer some questions for you that I know you're probably going to ask me, and I'm going to go through those. Number one, what does it cost to come into my clinic? Okay, there's a sheet on the back of your thing there that kind of outlines all that there for you. I want to clear up all kind of gray areas here so we know exactly what to expect. Number one, I do not take insurance in my clinic for the first 2 visits. I do not take insurance. Okay, I do take all insurances, but I'm not in network with hardly any insurance companies. Does anybody know why that is? Because they tell me what kind of care you get, and therefore, if this gentleman needs so much care, and they say, we're not going to pay for it, how am I supposed to help them? So we do programs and plans for families, so you just got to trust me on that. But the cost in my clinic to come in for the first visit is normally $170. What I do is, whenever I speak, at churches or I partner with certain individuals, the first 2 visits in my clinic are 60% off. Okay, so all the diagnostic testing, everything that you would need to be able to figure out, okay, do we have a brain health issue? What's going on here? Are we in fight or flight mode? What does that look like, or what can I expect on the first visit? Come in, I'll take your insurance card, so we have it on file. We'll give you a tour of my office. Okay, I'll give you a tour. And then my associate doctor, Dr. Mary, she's been in practice for 25 years. She'll kind of walk you through some diagnostic stuff and whatever, and really answer any questions that you have. Maybe you've got some lifestyle stuff. Maybe you've got some nutrition or detoxification questions. We'll do all that. And then on that second visit, you'll come back and I'll sit down with you and I'll go over exactly what I found and whether or not I can help you or not. And if you need, let's just say you've got an issue here with your spine, I'll actually walk you through some exercises, get you adjusted, and then we'll do what I call stress x-rays and with some brain exercises to kind of break those neurological patterns. That's also discounted as well, because I don't really know what your spine's going to do until I do that. Someone's like, man, so how much is it going to cost? How long is it going to take? Well, I don't really know, because Pastor Al's spine's different than Michelle's spine. Everybody's different. And then will I get adjusted, or will I receive care on the first visit? It really just depends. I've got patients that travel all the way from Logan, Ohio to come see me. And so if they're traveling an hour and a half to come see me, I'll probably adjust them on the first visit. But, if you're traveling for 25, 30 minutes away, I really do take some time to break down the exam and the x-rays, so I know I'm giving you a quality product at the end. Because sometimes it's like, if you've ever been to my clinic, it can get a little bit nuts in there. So I don't want to just throw stuff together and give you a crappy product. Does that make sense? Couple things. If you want to make a new patient appointment today, go ahead and do that. You can write down your information there. Dr. Steven will be in the back, and he'll answer any questions for you. It's $69 for the first visit. Listen, I will take your payment today. Okay, Dr. Steven will do that in the back. I do that because most people who don't come or don't pay, they actually don't show up for their appointment. And I'm not saying that's going to be you, but that's just the procedures and the systems that we use. So if you do make an appointment but you don't show up for it, that can take away a spot from somebody else. If you do that, what I'm going to do is on your first visit, you're going to get a week free brain exercise program. So I'm actually going to give you, I put together like an exercise program for you that you can kind of do for a week that'll kind of give you some idea of what to do there at your first visit. Also, go to revivechiro.com for more free nutrition and exercise stuff. I've got exercise videos on our website. It's all free for you. There's so much information on there. I've got a podcast. I've got a radio show. I'm on 98.9 FM, 880 AM, Saturdays and Sundays for a full hour. I mean, I talk so much stuff on there about lifestyle. If you never came to see me, I mean, just going to our website and like taking advantage of some of the stuff that we have is super, super advantageous for you. Okay? Make sense? I haven't gotten any text messages. Actually, wait a minute. I got one here and I'll answer. You know, if you guys fill those out or whatever, just let me know. While I'm answering some of the questions, Stephen will take you in the back. How do we try to gain more truthful knowledge on health and wellness when there are immense amount of opinions out there that are constantly being debated and debunked? Great question. Well, there's a difference between knowledge, opinions, and knowledge. Opinions are opinions, which everybody is entitled to their own opinion. Okay, we live in, I think, somewhat of a free country. Debatable, but you know, an opinion is different than scientific fact. I think the problem is that a lot of individuals are looking to, and I think this is probably going towards more of a COVID question, which is like, well, if the CDC says this, or if this person says this, then, and you're saying this, how should I believe you over them? I don't know how to answer that question, besides the fact of, just because somebody is looked at as an expert doesn't necessarily mean that they're actually an expert. Just because somebody says this is fact doesn't necessarily mean it's a fact. Let me use an example. Okay, can I use an example? Vaccinations. Many of you in this room don't want to know about vaccinations. Like, we just don't want to know about them. Like, we go to the doctor. We're told, hey, do this, and we just do it. Would you guys agree? Like, we don't ask question, we just do it. We just do exactly what we're told to do. This person said to do it, and everybody else is doing it, so it's good. Would you agree? I think that that's crazy. Not because I think vaccines are bad or good. I just don't understand why it is that we would never want to question. Like, why the question is everything. Have you ever actually looked at some of the science or the behind-the-scenes things when it comes to vaccines, you would be appalled at what you would see. But because it's out of sight, out of mind, and because we live in a world where everything is good, and because we're going with the herd, we don't ever want to go against anything that has to do with, that could potentially challenge. That's just one example. I always tell people all the time, the CDC, do you know how many patents the CDC owns as far as vaccination rights? Do you guys know how many patents they own? The 78 vaccinations that are on the market right now, the CDC owns 52 patents to them. I don't know about you, but when I think about science, I think, wow, if I own a patent to something, like, am I going to wiggle a little bit if I want to try to get something through? Does anybody here own a patent to something? Does anybody here own a patent? I've got friends of mine that own patents. They'll tell you whatever it is they have to tell you to make sure something goes through, because that's my product, right? Just because you see something online or on the news doesn't necessarily mean it's true. I think we should question everything, and we should question the science. Plus, everything is being censored now. Like, if anything goes against like traditional medical science or what the agenda looks like, they take it off. That doesn't necessarily mean that it's bad. It just means that it's going against the agenda of what they're trying to create. Does this make sense? I mean, I think ultimately it comes down to just a belief, a deep grounded belief that or in my heart. Like the Bible, for me, people ask me all the time, so can you prove to me that that this is absolutely like fact? If I went to everybody in this room and I said, can you prove to me with scientific data and fact and history that everything that's written in the Bible is fact? I can guarantee you that most of you in this room cannot prove that to me. Would you agree? You don't have the scientific data or evidence to prove that, but you believe in something deeply because it's changed your life. Would you agree with that? So do you need to have scientific fact, all of it figured out, to be able to know that you have a deep belief and love for the gospel? That's the way I look at science. Like, some things just don't make sense to me. And I have a belief that the body was born amazing. We were not born sick and weak, and I don't think that we need all these things from the outside in, and I think that there's agendas. There's a lot of things that are missing. I question those things. It doesn't mean that, I just don't go with the herd with everything, and I would challenge you to do that as well, that sometimes we just have to have a deep-rooted belief in something. Does that make sense? That was a long-winded question to say. I mean, I've been telling people, I've been published in peer-reviewed literature. I've been in scientific journals. I've been published, and I know how easy it is to get published in journals. I've done more research over the past 6 months than I probably have in my entire life on masks, vaccinations, viruses, bacteria. It's kind of like one of those scales that's kind of going like this, right? So it's not like this. Boom. Does that make sense? It's not like this. It's kind of like this. So who do you believe? I think it all comes back to what's the best for you, your family? What do you feel like after you've done the research? But the person who says, this is just the way that it is. This is just the way that it is. And I'm like, well, do you have any research to prove, or do you want to have an intelligent conversation? They're like, no, you're reckless. And I'm like, well, they don't even have any research to prove their belief system, right? It's just matter of fact, and that's not healthy either, okay? Any other questions? How do you examine if an X-ray is necessary? Everybody's X-ray is necessary. Why would I say that? If you're a human being and you're under gravity and you've never had an X-ray, the one system in the body that controls all the other systems is the nervous system, and it's protected by the spine. We can see our teeth every day. If there's something that's not right with our teeth, we kind of freak out about it, and then we go to the dentist. We can't see our spines, but the spine is kind of the framework of everything. How many sets of teeth can you get? As many as you want, really, but your spine is the only one you're ever going to get. So having an X-ray of a spine is absolutely necessary in all ways. The only way that it wouldn't potentially be necessary is if you're a young baby and you're not even weight bearing yet. So an X-ray wouldn't be worth it. But I have taken X-rays of babies that are seizing and things like that, and that is valuable to me. But if you're an adult and you're on 2 feet and you're over the age of 6 and you've never had an X-ray is extremely important to tell me a lot about physiology and kind of where you're at. Does that make sense? Good questions. What is a healthy amount of weight loss? Is there a percentage rate over time to follow? This is a great question. Scientifically, they say 1 to 2 pounds a week. I say, where did that come from? That came from a study that was probably done on an unhealthy individual, and that's what they did. But that study was done on them, not you. And so I go to, if you're eating healthy and you're exercising and you're doing all the right things and you're not starving yourself and you're not taking weight loss pills and whatever, let your body do what it wants to do. That's my answer. Let your body do what it innately wants to do. Your body has wisdom in it. Do you know that? Your body has this innate wisdom that God put there. Your body is way smarter than I am. Al's body is way smarter than me. So if Al comes to me and says, hey, Dr. B, you just need to fix me, and my health is your responsibility. I look at Al and look, man, I'll give you all the tools, but your body is way smarter than mine. And you know, your body knows exactly what it needs to do more than I do. Like science can't figure that out. I mean, hundreds of years we've been studying the atom and the cell, and we still can't figure it out. You know why? Because we'll never be able to figure out the innate wisdom that God put there. No one knows that. So the answer is that it's different for everybody. If you're doing the right things, you're not starving yourself, you're not doing, horrible weight loss gimmicks and plans, and you're doing the right things necessary, and you lose 5 to 10 pounds that week, then lose 5 to 10 pounds that week. I always tell moms that freak out about the pediatrician height and weight growth charts for their kids. Oh my gosh, like, we're only at the 70th percentile. And I'm like, did you ever think that maybe your baby is just innately different than the baby down the street? Like, why do we have to compare ourselves to the Gerber-fed high fructose corn syrup baby? Which is what those... No, it is. That's the growth and weight charts for pediatricians are based upon those kind of babies. Babies that are breastfed for over a year who don't eat those kind of things are not going to be as heavy. Stop it. Like, why do we have to compare ourselves to everybody else? Like, that's not it. Like, Mr. Gordon is Mr. Gordon. Like, if he's healthy and he's doing everything he needs to do, then... it's like, let his body do innately what it wants to do. I had a mom come in and their pediatrician was scaring him because he wasn't tall enough. And they were like just putting all this kind of fear in him. I'm like, is he sick? Is he eating? Is he gaining? They're like, yeah, I mean, he's healthy, like whatever. Mom is like under 4'2". And I was like, listen, like he's not going to be tall, and it was just like, you know what I mean? Like just watch comparing yourself to, those systems. What are some of your favorite books that go in depth on nutrition and movement? So one of my favorite books that I would say that would not be like over the top, Fat Doesn't Make You Fat, is a great book because I think that fat is probably the missing link in your diet. And most of you would say, well, oh my gosh, like in order to be healthy, I have got fatophobia. But if you were to come to me and you were to say, I want some like really specific nutrition advice, I would tell you, you need to eat more healthy fat and way less carbohydrates and sugar. And if you did that, you would probably lose 10 to 15 pounds over the course of the next 28 days if you continue to do that. Most of you in this room are sugar adapted. You love sugar, you love carbohydrates, and therefore you crave those things. I'm very fat adapted, which means that I probably won't eat anything until about 2 or 3 o'clock today, and I won't be hungry because my body is using fat as a fuel source. And so Fat Doesn't Make You Fat. Fat for Fuel is another really good book by Joseph Mercola. It's called Fat for Fuel. Has nothing to do with nutrition. It has nothing to do with movement. Switch on Your Brain is a must-read book for everybody in this room because until you understand how the body and how the brain works and how God created your body, it doesn't matter exercise or nutrition. Some of you, listen, it's 90% in your head. Do you know that? Like it's 90% mental and 10% physical. Like I am so serious. Like I tell people that I adjust minds more than I adjust spines. Tell Pastor Al, like, I mean, is this true or not? Like, if you don't believe and you don't believe that your body can heal and you don't have a consistent, and you believe that your body was born sick and weak and needs medications and drugs to survive, you'll never be healthy. If you're a victim of genetics, you'll never be healthy. You've got to change your brain and then you can worry about nutrition and exercise. Because if you worry about nutrition and exercise 90% of the time, but you still don't believe that your body can heal and change, you're just going to yo-yo, right? You're just going to yo-yo. I mean, I have read every single nutrition exercise book. I've studies. I can be on stage with Josh Axe and all those guys, and I can give you every single scientific formula behind everything. But if you don't believe that you can do it, and you don't believe that God has a... Listen to this. Let me read this to you real quick. This is Dr. Gail Ironson, leading mind-body medicine researcher, professor of psychology and psychiatry at the University of Miami. she found that the most significant factor that made a difference in healing for those with HIV was their choice to believe in a benevolent and loving God, especially if they also chose to have a personal relationship with a benevolent God and loving God. Her study ran over 4 years, and her determination of healing was based on the decrease of their viral load. The amount of AIDS virus is a sample of blood, and the increased concentration of helper T cells, the higher the concentration, the more the body is able to fight disease. She found that those who did not believe God loved them lost helper T cells 3 times faster. Ladies and gentlemen, if you believe that you're a victim and that you were born sick and weak and that there's this boogeyman virus out there that's going to kill you, and you believe that you're not strong enough to fight it, you will be a victim. You do not need to read any more books besides the Bible itself. One, scientifically and physiologically, it's all there, but you got to believe what you're reading. That right there enough, that's some of the leading research in the world, hands down, boom, T helper cells, I believe that God loves me, because I believe in God, but to really truly believe that God loves you and that you are truly forgiven, that took me a long time to say that, hey, God forgave me, you got to forgive yourself, get some grace. And that's where the healing happens, right? And then you can start to add all the science and the stuff, but if you don't, that's huge, okay? I don't think I have any more questions. Cool? This is recorded, or was recorded, okay? So it'll be there available for you to read.